Hello and welcome to this unit on higher education system. We are under the sixth part of this unit on higher education system, and the sixth part of the new syllabus contains policies, government and administration. Like we mentioned in the previous video, I had divided this into two parts, part A and part B. Part A, which I've already covered, constitution. In this video, we will shift the focus and we'll look at the role of prime minister, we'll look at president, we'll look at vice president, and we'll look at what's the selection process, we'll look at what is the eligibility criteria and what are the powers vested with these different roles. Also, we will look at the judicial system of our country. So let's get started. So first is really the role of president, and when we talk about president, there are certain qualifications for you to become the president of the country. One, you have to be the citizen of this country. You should have completed 35 years of age, and you should be qualified for election as a member of the House of the People. Also, and this is similar point across these different roles, is that you should not hold any office of profit under the government of India in order to be eligible for the presidentship. Now, there are certain powers of the president, certain powers that the president enjoys. One, he can appoint the several ministers, PM and chief judges of Supreme and High Court. He is really the supreme commander of the defense forces. He appoints the chief of army, navy, air force. He appoints the finance commission. In terms of money bills, they are to be introduced in Lok Sabha, but should be first prior approval should be given by the president, and he can also declare, he or she can also declare wars and can conclude peace to the approval of parliament. And president also has certain powers with respect to emergency powers and can grant pardon, remit punishment or commute death sentence. So these are the different powers of the president. Now, if I talk about the election, how a president is elected, so again they are elected by electoral college, right, by voting. And again, this follows, there are two things here. So one is the elected members of the houses of parliament. The parliament really contains of the president and the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. So the houses, meaning the lower house, the Lok Sabha, as well as the upper house, the Rajya Sabha. So members, the MPs there will they cast a single transferable vote and then they select the president. Also, we take into account the elected members of the legislative assemblies of the states. Now, when we say legislative assemblies of states, so these were all the MPs of Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha, and these are really the MLAs. And when we talk about the MLAs, these are MLAs from the 29 states as well as the union territories. Now, just one thing to note here is that while we have our 29 states, in terms of 7 union territories, only 2 union territories have legislative assemblies. That means we will only take MLAs from these 2 union territories. And which are those? These are Delhi and Pondicherry. So this is just small thing that we should make a note in case a question comes to that effect. Okay, so this is about the president. Also, how the voted are counted. There are certain values of the votes that you come to depending on the population of state, depending on the total number of MLAs. I wouldn't go into too much of detail. We are not studying for polity for IAS exam, so I think I leave it here. Let's move on to the next role, which is the role of the prime minister. Now, when we talk about the prime minister, he is really the executive authority, right? And for him to qualify, one, he should be the citizen of India. He should be a member of Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. If the person chooses to be prime minister and is neither a part of any of the houses, he or she should become within 6 months a member of these houses. Also, he should be above 25 years of age if he is a member of Lok Sabha, because that's the criteria to join Lok Sabha, and 30 years if he or she is the member of Rajya Sabha. And he should not, of course, hold any office of profit under the government of India. In terms of his powers, like I said, he is the real executive authority. He exercises the authority of the government of India, and what he also does is he is somebody who's responsible for certain administrative and appointment powers, like he can recommend to the president, the names of a chief election commissioner, the auditor general, the UPSC members, attorney general, etc. And certain legislative powers, that he can act as the leader of the house of the chamber of parliament, right, generally the Lok Sabha, and of course he's a member generally where she belongs to. And he can allocate certain portfolios, right, to the various ministers. He appoints his council of ministers. He can in fact dissolve Lok Sabha before the expiry, and he also can allocate portfolios like I discussed, and can also recommend to the president about allocating or deallocating certain portfolios, and can recommend somebody's dismissal as a minister as well. So these are the powers of the Prime Minister. Now, if you talk about the Vice President, again, he should be the citizen of India. He should have completed 35 years of age, and he should be qualified for election as a member of Council of States. Again, Council of States here is the Rajya Sabha. And for somebody to be a Vice President also, he should not hold any office of profit under the Government of India. Now, sometimes there are some cases where the Vice President can act as the President, and especially during casual vacancies. And when we talk about casual vacancies, this could be various emergencies. It could be the death of the President, it could be the resignation or removal of the President, or his absence in office, or any illness for that matter. And this is listed in Article 65. Also, how a Vice President is elected, again through an electoral college, and where the electoral college here consists of the members of Houses of Parliament, which is MPs of the Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, and with a proportional representation. So this is the eligibility and the qualification, the election of the Vice President. Now, if you look at Parliament, like I discussed, there's the President, and there's the upper house, the Rajya Sabha, and lower house, the Lok Sabha. So let's discuss and see the difference between Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha in terms of in terms of tenure, in terms of their presiding officer, in terms of what it means. So Lok Sabha is really the house of the people, meaning people choose their representatives directly, and whereas Rajya Sabha is the Council of States. Here they're representing mostly states, because what you have in Rajya Sabha is that all these MPs of Rajya Sabha are chosen by the MLAs, which are of various states. So they get to make the decision. So they are really representing states, whereas here they are representing the people directly. Now, if you look at Lok Sabha, it is temporary, and every 5 years there, of course, it has to be dissolved. And sometimes what happens is it can be extended to 6 years also in case of an emergency, right? So that means +1 you can include it in extended by a year. Whereas Rajya Sabha is typically a permanent body, and however 1/3 of the members retire every 2 years. And if you look at the maximum number of members in Lok Sabha, it is 552, whereas you have 530 from the various 29 states, and you have 20 from the Union Territory, and you have 2 really your Anglo-Indians representation, whereas here it is 250 members. Out of these, 238 are really your states and Union Territory, right? States plus Union Territory, whereas 12 are specially chosen by the President. And these 12 are people who are chosen for their expertise. So the President makes a choice, and these are 12 could be chosen in various fields. They could be from arts, they could be from literature, they could be from science, they could be from social service, etc. And in terms of the minimum age criteria, again for Lok Sabha it's 25 years and it's 30 years for Rajya Sabha. Introduction of money bill can only happen in Lok Sabha. It can only be introduced in Lok Sabha. However, Rajya Sabha does get an opportunity to recommend. Presiding officer. In terms of presiding officer, the speaker is the presiding officer of Lok Sabha, whereas the chairman of Rajya Sabha is usually the Vice President of India, and he is really the presiding officer for Rajya Sabha. Just a small difference in terms of their powers. So Lok Sabha makes laws on matters included in union and concurrent list, and can introduce and enact money and non-money bills. Rajya Sabha cannot introduce the money bills, whereas Lok Sabha can. So this is one big difference. Approves proposals for taxation, budgets and annual financial statements, right? So to do with finance, again big role to play. And they can control the executive by asking questions, supplementary questions, etc. They elect the president and vice president, and can remove judges of Supreme Court and High Court. Also they can amend the constitution through the Constitution Amendment Bill, and we will discuss that. Also they establish committees, commissions and consider their reports. Similarly for Rajya Sabha also, they can consider and approve non-money bills. Non-money bills, remember these were mostly bills, right? They can consider approve non-money bills. They can approve constitutional amendments. They exercise control over executive by asking questions, and they participate in the election, removal of the president, vice president, judges, etc. Can give union parliament power to make laws on matters included in the state list, right? Because this is again Council of States. So these were the powers of the lower and upper house. In terms of bills, I think there are 4 types of bills that you should remember. One, you have your ordinary bills, you have your money bills, you have your financial bills, and fourth, of course, you have your Constitution Amendment Bill, which is mentioned here as well, right? Your Constitution Amendment money and money bill and non-money. It could be financial bill. So now, what's the difference between the different bills? So when you talk about an ordinary bill can be passed by any house. I mean, that means it has to be passed by both, of course, right, by simple majority, but introduction can be done by either the upper house or the lower house. And typically, unless the bill comes under Article 3, it doesn't need the president's prior recommendation. So whether Rajya Sabha introduces it, Lok Sabha introduces, they don't need really, in most cases, the prior approval of the president. And once they pass simple, they then share it with the other house, and then they do a simple majority to decide. If let's say one recommends something and the other house doesn't approve, it could result in a situation of deadlock where there would be a joint session, and that's how you decide and take a call on that bill. Any bill that contains matters under Article 110, so this is Article 110, would be falling under and as a money bill. Now, one thing to remember here is money bills can only and only be introduced by Lok Sabha. Rajya Sabha does not have the power, and once they decide on it by simple majority, the Lok Sabha decides, then they can send it to Rajya Sabha for what they feel about it, but the power rests with Lok Sabha. Now when we talk about financial bill, right, that means any financial bill, right, what it is. So anything under Article 110, of course, plus anything which is non-monetary also, right, so that becomes your financial bill. Now this again can only be introduced in the Lok Sabha, but once they introduce it, then it more or less, it goes to then Rajya Sabha and ask for the approval, etc. Works like mostly like the ordinary bill. Constitution Amendment Bill is important. If you remember the very important article, right, the 368 article in our constitution, which talks about how the constitution can be amended, right? Now this bill can be introduced by any house. That means whether it's Rajya Sabha or Lok Sabha, anybody can introduce this, and of course it will take its course as simple majority, and then the amendment to the constitution could be made. So that's it about the different types of bills. Let's move to the judicial system of our country. So if you look at the judicial system of our country, it's called a single integrated judiciary. Integrated, why? Because something can move to higher court, and then from there, from high court to Supreme Court. And if you talk about the role of Supreme Court is really the final authority, meaning the final interpreter of constitution is Supreme Court. And the certain duties are given here. Again, they can transfer judges of high courts, the decisions that Supreme Court takes are binding on all the courts, meaning the most powerful court in the country is Supreme Court. They can move cases from one court to itself and can transfer cases from High Court to another. If you look at the High Court, they can issue writs for restoring fundamental rights. They can hear appeals from lower court because it's upper court for the lower courts, right? And can deal with cases within the jurisdiction of the state. So again, within the jurisdiction of state, right? Now in terms of district court, they decide cases involving serious criminal offenses and considers appeals and decisions given by the lower courts and arising in district. So their scope really is the district, here is state, right? And if you look at subordinate courts, this consider cases of civil and criminal nature. We haven't dealt too much with the appointment of judges in Supreme Court in this video because we didn't want to go too much into detail. But if you look at the appointment of judges of Supreme Court, so somebody can become a judge of the Supreme Court if he or she has spent 5 years as a judge in High Court, 5 years as a judge in High Court, or 10 years as a advocate in succession in a High Court, right? So these are really the eligibility criteria if you talk about the judges. And typically in the Supreme Court, right, you have 31 judges, wherein is one, of course, your CJI, which is one, the Chief Justice of India, the most senior judge in terms of age mostly, and the other remaining 30 are the other judges. So Supreme Court, you have 31 judges, right? Typically to become judge of Supreme Court, right, I've discussed the details, and it's usually appointed by the president. So this is a little bit on the Supreme Court and how the judges are appointed. Now if you look at the jurisdiction of Supreme Court, right, it does various roles, right? It settles disputes between union and the states, right? While the High Courts usually deals with issues about states and the concerns there, it can settle disputes between union and states. So that is one role. Of course, it can listen to appeals from lower courts in civil, criminal, constitutional cases. It can advise the president in matters of public importance and law. It can grant special leave to appeal from any judgment, and also certain writs. Now I've seen some students usually getting confused with writs, so I wouldn't want to spend too much time, but it's very easy. So if you talk about habeas corpus, right, so what it means, right? So these are writs. A writ is something which is very simple, meaning it is nothing but a formal written order, right? It could be by a court or usually things that are issued by authority. So if you talk about habeas corpus, is basically it's around detention, meaning if somebody is detained illegally, right? So you can save somebody from illegal detention through this writ of habeas corpus, right? And the meaning of habeas corpus means to have the body off. In case of illegal detention, you can use this. This is one. Now second after this is mandamus. Again, when we say mandamus, it actually means in English to command. So what really it is, that you can command as the High Court or as a Supreme Court, you can command somebody to perform their public duty. That means it could be issued to a public official, it could be issued to a corporation, to an inferior court, or to the government, right? And you can as a court, Supreme Court or High Court, you can command that you do your job well, meaning you perform your public duty, but that duty has to be mandatory. In terms of the third one, which is really prohibition, again it's very simple. It says prohibition is forbid. So it's basically around if a higher court says to the lower court to not to exceed its jurisdiction. That means you are saying that a lower court to either forbid or pronounce its judgment, right? They may have given a wrong judgment, so in that case this comes into play. Then there is also your certiorari. It means to be certified. You order the court not to bring its judgment to effect, meaning it can be from a higher court to a lower court to either transfer a case pending or quash the order. So it could be anything. And then the fifth one is really your quo warranto, wherein we are saying that by what authority. So this can be issued by anyone, and typically by a court to inquire into the legality of somebody's claim. So somebody is assumed a public office, you can always question by what authority you've assumed it. Do you have the right? Have you followed the process, etc.? So these are the 5 writs, right, that we typically people have doubts with. But with this, we are coming to the end of this video, and I hope you had a good understanding, and we also come to the end of this unit on higher education system. So thanks for watching these videos, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.